artwork, photographs. They'll compile that, give it to a family, possibly someday put it in a public place that everybody will have the opportunity to see. Though that concept of somehow, some way, the people that the police officers serve being able to show back, I appreciate you and I appreciated your life, as some of the police cars actually get underway on pit road at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Is it gratifying for the officers who served with her to know that people are struggling but will not be daunted in their effort to try to show respect some way?
Well, absolutely. That's one of the changes, one of the adjustments that was made for the current period that we're experiencing. Typically, that squad car at East District there would be a gathering place for people. People would gather there to grieve, to mourn, and to commune together, along with the officers that are typically there. And in this particular case, they were not able to do that in the way that would be traditional. But still, people were able to leave some mementos and some articles there that are very meaningful to them, and those will all be tendered to the family when this is concluded.
If you look to the center of your screen, you'll see several squad cars on the move. If you look to the right side of your screen, you will see vehicles leaving what we've long known as Gasoline Alley, and instead today being used for family cars, the hearse, the trailer that we will describe for you in a little bit, taking the coach, the hearse if you will, with the body of Breann Leath out to the main part of the oval at Indianapolis Motor Speedway as you see more of the cars get underway. This is a process that will take quite some time because, again, the vehicles need to move slowly enough for officers to be able to place the carnations dipped in red that they're all wearing on the back of that likely flatbed. I've not seen it yet, but a trailer that's easy for them to get to and then get back to their squad car so the next person can do it in line. We showed a picture a bit ago that I misidentified. Want to let you know that procession is not started yet. It was actually an image of the cars going in earlier this morning. My apologies for that. But again, the main part of this is still not yet started in terms of the first steps of taking the body from Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and there's a look at the hearse, back toward downtown East District, and then ultimately Crown Hill Cemetery for the final resting place. There are times in the ceremony that are frankly difficult. This is one of those. This means that the family has said its final goodbyes, at least close contact with the casket. There'll be, again, a graveside service, a very limited one this year because of the circumstances, but a quiet moment alone. That was likely the last time that they would have in the suites up at off the pagoda of Indianapolis Motor Speedway. There's an aerial view of a truly remarkable sight. Squad cars lining both sides of the track around the entire 2.5-mile oval and both sides up and down pit lane. Also some back in Gasoline Alley as well, as Indianapolis Motor Speedway hosts certainly its first law enforcement funeral. I can't go all the way back in the 110-odd some year history of the track to know that there's never been another service there, but there's certainly never been a service like this. It is 1:40. If you're joining us online at wishtv.com or our app or our Facebook page, if you're watching us on a broadcast, thank you as well. If you, for instance, have to leave the TV, do want to let you know those other options available for you, so you can watch it in the phone in your hand or the computer that you're in front of, or through Radio Now with our partners down the line as well. And you can also follow us on Facebook at Facebook's Wish TV's Facebook page. Left side, Main Straight turning into turn 1. Right side of your screen is turn 2, the exit of 2, down into the backstretch, and then you see the vehicles making their way there. So that's the first part of that procession, of course, which will be taking the body not just around the track for those gestures from each individual officer, but ultimately around the city as well. In terms of a purely planning thing, Gary Woodruff, there is a usefulness to the city streets not being full right now. It makes it, in terms of a pragmatic thing, a little easier to do what you want to do, correct?
Yeah, sure. And you know, there'll still be some traffic interruptions along the procession route, of course, and we know most people will be sensitive to that. And there'll be people that will be gathering along the procession route as well. And that's very meaningful to the officers and to the officers' family, as they are passing by, to see that community support out there in so many ways. While maintaining the proper social distancing and with the proper protection measures in place. To see that community support, it's immeasurable in its impact to the officers and family.
It is. It's interesting to hear the guidance on that, because the official sort of guidance issued was, please do not line the parade route in public areas where you might put yourself or others at risk. Though it did mention an awful lot of homes and some small businesses line the route.
Sure.
So if you're on your property and you're with the loved ones that you're hunkering down with, it would be perfectly appropriate to do that, as long as you maintain distance from others.
Sure. I think with a great many people, there'll still be people out there to pay what the respects that they feel they need to pay to Officer Leath and her family.
We certainly saw that along 16th Street when we first signed on early this morning.
Sure.
People were there in their PJs and surgical masks,
right?
Trying to get out early, but also be safe while they were out there, to make sure that they had the opportunity to wish a fond farewell as the procession into the track was happening. About 7 o'clock this morning was done by about 7:30. We are now 1:43 in the afternoon. Funeral service started just a few ticks after 11 o'clock this morning. Services happened inside a couple of room suites at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Quite frankly, they did a bang-up job of unifying that service, while also keeping, you may not have even known as you watched, while keeping it in separate rooms. They had tried to keep no more than 10 people to a room, but it felt very much like hearts were all in the same place.
Sure, and even the speakers were using two separate podiums.
Yes.
It appeared. And they did again, the planners of this whole service have just done a masterful job in planning it with, amended services with full honors, yet extended to Officer Leath and her family.
And when we see the hearse drive by, we may take a moment to pause out of respect. But until this procession reaches that point, I do want to talk about the things that you do see in every officer's funeral, but also some of the things you don't see. There's never a moment where Officer Breann Leath's remains were left alone, correct?
Correct. From the moment the incident occurred on the day of her passing, she has never been alone, and there have been officers who have been with her the entire time, and at every place that she was taken to the hospital, and then to every step in between, to where she's at now. There has been at least one police officer with her. That's a great comfort to the family, knowing that their loved one was never alone.
And that's not duty that you have to assign either. Typically, there are plenty of volunteers for that.
Well, there are plenty of volunteers, and typically you don't. Nobody likes to turn anybody away, but there are so many volunteers that not everybody has an opportunity to do that. But when you do, it's solemn and it's heartfelt, and yeah, there's no lacking of volunteers to perform that duty.
To the degree that you were talking about, sort of the fellowship between different departments, there you see an ambulance representing emergency services, the paramedics and medics that work in Indianapolis, followed by one of the trucks from Indianapolis Fire Department in among those squad cars as well. Not at all a surprise to see that, right?
No, not at all. And again, the public safety, family, all. We're all in it together, and we pay the respects to each other when circumstances like this do occur, and we're all affected by it, of course. And remember, there were medics that responded to the call on that day as well. We should certainly keep them in our thoughts as today goes along also. As
we move through the day, I want to ask your perspective and expertise on what kind of services and support are available for those who were part of that terrible day. Let's pause for a moment as we watch the hearse taking the body of Officer Breann Leath on its lap of Indianapolis Motor Speedway, which again is serving as the host site for the funeral today. And there you see, first look at the trailer with Officer Leath's picture in it, and also the police officers with the ability to put the carnations inside. We'll get a longer view of that as we move forward. But if there were any fears that this was going to be a painfully short and small procession because of the circumstances that we're under, this look in turn 2 should ease those fears. Again, with the safe distance between all, there are an awful lot of squad cars that are still able to be part of this, at least the lap of the track. We'll see when they get out onto city streets if that is still the case. But again, this is a crowded track, but still everybody able to, with the width of it, sort of maintain that safe distance, and each of the officers get the opportunity to come up to the trailer and place the flower inside. I had never considered this, Gary Woodruff, Indianapolis Motor Speedway as the venue for a funeral, because frankly we've never had to in the past. So far seems, in its very Indianapolis sort of a way, very fitting.
It is such a iconic and meaningful location for all of us, especially those of us who grew up in this area. And while we never envisioned this, it is quite a sight to behold, is it not?
Boy, and as we look at the lead vehicles making the turn, thinking that's turn 3. It could be the turn out of 4 into the home stretch, but you saw the motorcycles at the lead. Again, late April, early May, we start seeing the motorcycle drill team as part of the 500 festival service. That's not going to happen, at least not as planned this year. Everything's all wonky with the public health emergency, but yet we get to see many of those same officers that delight the folks along the parade route with their skills and their tricks, now serving a much more solemn and serious role today, but doing it with no less skill. This is a live look, again, Indianapolis Motor Speedway. There you see what is usually the home of motor racing now, not just here in Indianapolis, but the greater goal is to make it the home of entertainment for the entire state. Again, pressed into service. And Gary, by the description you got, with no pause, no hesitation, the folks at Indianapolis Motor Speedway said, yes, we can help you.
Yes, that's what my understanding was that the Motor Speedway leadership reached out almost from the beginning. If there's anything we can do to help, we will. And have they ever?
Yeah. Again, both sides. Officers would be standing there, and they've been standing to a layman, myself, I think of it as at attention. What's the posture? What's the pose? What is protocol for them right now?
Sure. So until they were called to attention while the ceremonial aspects were taking place earlier, the playing of taps, then would be put in a position of parade rest, which is a more relaxed position. And then as the coach comes back around, as the procession and the coach comes back around, they'll return to the position of attention and render the proper salute. And then when the vehicle passes with the trailer, they'll step forward, place their carnation into the trailer. That's something that would typically take place at the interment site. In this particular case, this is one of the modifications that the viewers are seeing here in deference to the current environment we're in. And they're doing that as the procession passes by all the officers that are lining the track to place their carnations into the trailer.
It is the yard of bricks right there, start-finish line for the Indianapolis 500 for decades. It is the very probably iconic heart of an iconic venue of Indianapolis Motor Speedway, serving today as a place and a way to honor the life and loss of a young police officer in Indianapolis, Officer Breann Leath, who died 1 week ago today. Violence, trying to help, by the accounts of the investigators, a woman who was in danger. In the description of Mayor Joe Hogsett, ran toward the harm, which is something that we hear said about police officers in particular, that they have to either have or develop the ability to run toward the very things that chase the rest of us away. Breann Leath would have had an acute understanding of that with her parents in public service.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we know the risks when we take the oath, and yeah, forward we go. And when you're called to it, you wouldn't have it any other way.
So those were the comments from the mayor, echoing those that the governor had delivered as well. Chief Taylor called Breann Leath extraordinary. Sheriff Forrestall said there's not enough time to tell all the stories that there were to tell about Breann Leath, even though she was 24 years old.
Sure.
Had started this path at 20 with the job with the DOC and the National Guard, military police, all one moving to the next, eventually employment with Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department. The question I wanted to ask was, how hard is this for the officers who came into the force with her? I'm not sure that's as useful a question as how do those officers get support moving forward? Because if they're her very best friends as well as her closest colleagues, they're going to be on the force for an awful long time. This will shape them. This will alter their experience.
Sure, it will, and it became directly real to each of them on this occasion, as it has with many newer officers. And it's just such an impressive sight. I don't want to interrupt the flow here, but it's just such an impressive sight to see all those officers and vehicles on the iconic grounds of the Speedway. But something our profession has done much better at in recent years is offering those support services to law enforcement officers, to public safety officials. There was a time where we would not have talked about that at all. We would have kept that inside, and that is not healthy at all. And it's a lesson that we've learned over the years. And so there are professional services available, each individual agency, and then the Fraternal Order of Police. As a matter of fact, the IMPD, Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department, has been at the forefront of officer wellness and resiliency.
Really?
Yes, they have an entire unit they established, and they really have been at the forefront. They were recognized a few years ago by the U.S. Attorney General for being at the forefront for officer support and wellness and resiliency, and making sure you take care of the not just the physical needs, staying in shape, etc., but also the emotional, psychological needs as well. Everybody has to pour a little bit of water out of the cup every once in a while.
Boy, and it's true too that everybody does it in a different way in a different time.
Absolutely.
And by having an entity that's part of the overall body rather than trying to farm out support services when somebody comes forward, it would seem easier to say, that's why that's there. I don't care if you never knew her, but this hurts you, or if you were her partner, you can go immediately.
It's easier and frequently more beneficial to connect with somebody who's had shared experience as opposed to somebody who has not.
Sure.
And we've found that over the years. Again, that's where a great many of those mentoring aspects come into play. But the people, especially with IMPD and many other agencies, and some additional providers, also healthcare providers, have really been at the forefront as far as providing those services to law enforcement and public safety and the military as well over the years. Those are hard-earned lessons that our profession is doing much better at.
And this is not just the officers who were there at that door that day. This would be dispatchers, telecommunicators, people who had any contact with this incident would have a painful, deep memory of it.
Sure, and those services are offered and frequently taken up on. And sometimes that's in the short term, sometimes that's in the longer term. But each person manages that in their individual way. But just knowing that safety net exists is a huge comfort, and doing a little bit better about preparing officers up front for moments of trauma that they'll experience in their careers as well. It's an ongoing work in progress. There's still work to be done there, but we've come a long way in the nearly 37 years that I personally have been at it, and others have too.
The Indianapolis community isn't just Indianapolis. We say Indianapolis, but sometimes when we say that, we mean, and there, by the way, is the way to give condolences. Officer Leath Legacy at indy.gov is a place that you can send any message, artwork, anything of that nature, and it'll get out to the folks who are aggregating all of that and making it available to the family and to anybody who would want to leave thoughts, memories for the public to see as well. But I started to say that we say Indianapolis as shorthand, but that could mean Lawrence, and that could mean Speedway. Well,
Sure.
Speedway, of course. There's this IMPD event that's happening in Speedway, which has its own police force as well. Talk about the way Lawrence and Beech Grove and Speedway and Indianapolis and Southport and Cumberland and any place that has any entity at all links together, works together, lives together.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the unique things about Indianapolis is we have somewhat of a consortium law enforcement community here. You know, and with the development of Unigov, you have Indianapolis and Marion County combining resources and services. Then you had some of the excluded entities, which were Lawrence, Beech Grove, Speedway, have their own law enforcement agencies, but we all work together. You know, crime knows no boundaries, so we will pursue crime wherever we need to. On a day like this in particular, it might be interesting to point out that right now on the East District, you know, officers from other agencies are covering the East District so that Officer Leath's colleagues could attend these events and not have to worry about their district being covered. There are Lawrence officers, State Police, Cumberland, and along with, not just with East District, but with the other districts as well. There will be officers converging from around central Indiana to help out our colleagues with IMPD, and then of course, you know, they've done the same for us in our moments of need as well.
And it's worth underscoring then, if this felt like a holiday to the bad guys, it's not at all. And my understanding too is it's not hard to get officers to take those shifts.
No, not at all. You'll have more officers who will volunteer to work those shifts. Typically, it's not unusual to almost see double coverage in the districts and in the police districts that are being taken over by another agency or agencies. And of course, there are officers with IMPD that they're grieving in their own way, and they're going to work today.
Yeah.
You know, so it's part of the public safety family, and it's part of what, you know, makes this a unique profession.
Just hit the 2 o'clock hour. We are about a little more than an hour after the ceremonial part of the funeral service. The actual service, which included speakers, music, memories through video, the thoughts of pastors as well. And those happened, and I say those because it was in 2 different rooms in one of the buildings at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. If you know the track at all, there are some sort of tall-faced windows that have suites behind them where some of the more fortunate fans can watch the race from up close. Well, IMS gave the planners the keys to those for the day, and the hopes that they would be able to use them to put a service together, and that's exactly what happened. I believe it was 2 rooms, could have been more, considering the people that would have had to be there to support the technical side, but with at least 2 rooms with family members in one, some of the speakers in the other, to maintain that safe social distance, no more than 10 people in a room, but also give the opportunity for different people to speak, one right after the other. It looked very much like everyone was in the same room, but in fact it played out across at least 2 rooms there at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. We've seen police officers on motorcycle, in cars, in the larger profile vehicles. That escort of the motorcycles, my vision's not as good as it used to be. That's got to be next to the hearse, correct?
Yes, that is next to the coach.
So the coach, and bear with me for referring to it as the hearse, but that is what the organizers of the funeral call it. That's the coach, is followed by a few other vehicles. One of them is, I think it's a Tahoe that has a trailer on the back of it. Trailers, you know, I have a trailer, but it's kind of a workmanlike word for something that today is serving a much more profound service. All the officers along the route, and one of the reasons that the procession moves so slowly at this point, they have the opportunity to walk up to that trailer and place within it the red tipped white carnation that they've all worn upside down, facing down, during the duration of the ceremony, that symbolizes, and again, and we'll repeat some of the things that our viewers who've been kind enough to be with us the entire time, we'll repeat some of these things, but we do have some viewers who are joining us in progress. Remind us again what, as we see it pass by.
Sure. The white-tipped carnation represents that the officers have worn upside down. There's the coach crossing the yard of bricks. It represents the purity or the malevolence of service to the community, and the red tip represents the blood spilled in service and protection to the community. And it's a symbol of the meaning of this day.
And those carnations will be buried with Officer Breann Leath. Interesting, isn't it, too, to see the reactions of the different officers. If there's ever been a question that our police force has many people of different backgrounds and faiths, you see some of the officers genuflecting, crossing themselves after the hearse goes by, others with their own ways of honoring, but then all returning to attention as well. That is Officer Breann Leath. Her body is in that hearse, which is now headed into the first turn of Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and will soon, I believe, then go out the tunnel on 16th Street and start the procession. As we enter the end of this sort of ceremonial lap and start the more traditional parts of the day ahead, and it will be quite some time as you drive around central Indiana, if you are an essential worker or have some travel that is taking you away from the stay-at-home orders briefly, even if it's just to get provisions or whatnot, you may encounter this. It is like a typical funeral procession in that you'll be expected to stop as things pass.